Chapter 4. When the whole nation was finally across, God spoke to Joshua. Select 12 men from the people, a man from each tribe, and tell them, from right here, the middle of the Jordan, where the feet of the priests are standing firm, take 12 stones. Carry them across with you, and set them down in the place where you camp tonight. Joshua called out the 12 men whom he selected from the people of Israel, one man from each tribe. Joshua directed them, cross to the middle of the Jordan, and take your place in front of the chest of God, your God. Each of you heft a stone to your shoulder, a stone for each of the tribes of the people of Israel, so you'll have something later to mark the occasion. When your children ask you, what are these stones to you? You'll say, the flow of the Jordan was stopped in front of the chest of the covenant of God as it crossed the Jordan, stopped in its tracks. These stones are a permanent memorial for the people of Israel. The people of Israel did exactly as Joshua commanded. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, a stone for each of the 12 tribes, just as God had instructed Joshua, carried them across with them to the camp, and set them down there. Joshua set up the 12 stones taken from the middle of the Jordan that had marked the place where the priests who carried the chest of the covenant had stood. They are still there today. The priests carrying the chest continued standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything God had instructed Joshua to tell the people to do was done, confirming what Moses had instructed Joshua. The people crossed. No one dawdled. When the crossing of all the people was complete, they watched as the chest of the covenant and the priests crossed over. The Reubenites, Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh had crossed over in battle formation in front of the people of Israel, obedient to Moses' instructions. All told, about 40,000 armed soldiers crossed over before God to the plains of Jericho, ready for battle. God made Joshua great that day in the sight of all Israel. They were in awe of him, just as they had been in awe of Moses all his life. God told Joshua, command the priests carrying the chest of the testimony to come up from the Jordan. Joshua commanded the priests, come up out of the Jordan. They did it. The priests carrying God's chest of the covenant came up from the middle of the Jordan. As soon as the soles of the priests' feet touched dry land, the Jordan's waters resumed their flow within the banks, just as before. The people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month. They set up camp at the Gilgal, the circle, to the east of Jericho. Joshua erected a monument at the Gilgal, using the 12 stones that they had taken from the Jordan. And then he told the people of Israel, in the days to come, when your children ask their fathers, what are these stones doing here? Tell your children this. Israel crossed over this Jordan on dry ground. Yes, God, your God, dried up the Jordan's waters for you until you had crossed, just as God, your God, did at the Red Sea, which had dried up before us until we had crossed. This was so that everybody on earth would recognize how strong God's rescuing hand is, and so that you would hold God in solemn reverence, always. Chapter 5. When all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and the Canaanite kings along the seacoast heard how God had stopped the Jordan River before the people of Israel until they had crossed over, their hearts sank. The courage drained out of them just thinking about the people of Israel. At that time, God said to Joshua, make stone knives and circumcise the people of Israel a second time. So Joshua made stone knives and circumcised the people of Israel at Foreskins Hill. This is why Joshua conducted the circumcision. All the males who had left Egypt, the soldiers, had died in the wilderness on the journey out of Egypt. All the people who had come out of Egypt, of course, had been circumcised, but all those born in the wilderness along the way since leaving Egypt had not been. The fact is that the people of Israel had walked through that wilderness for 40 years until the entire nation died out, all the men of military age who had come out of Egypt but had disobeyed the call of God. God vowed that these would never lay eyes on the land God had solemnly promised to their ancestors to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. But their children had replaced them. These are the ones Joshua circumcised. They had never been circumcised. No one had circumcised them along the way. When they had completed the circumcising of the whole nation, they stayed where they were in camp until they were healed. God said to Joshua, today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt. That's why the place is called the Gilgal. It's still called that. The people of Israel continued to camp at the Gilgal. They celebrated the Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the month on the plains of Jericho. Right away, the day after the Passover, they started eating the produce of that country, unraised bread and roasted grain. And then, no more manna. The manna stopped. As soon as they started eating food grown in the land, there was no more manna for the people of Israel. That year, they ate from the crops of Canaan. And then this, while Joshua was there near Jericho, he looked up and saw right in front of him a man standing, holding his drawn sword. Joshua stepped up to him and said, "Whose side are you on? Ours or our enemies?" He said, "Neither. I'm commander of God's army. I've just arrived." Joshua fell face to the ground and worshipped. He asked, "What orders does my master have for his servant?" God's army commander ordered Joshua, "Take your sandals off your feet. The place you are standing is holy." Joshua did it. Chapter 6. Jericho. Jericho was shut up tight as a drum because of the people of Israel. No one going in, no one coming out. God spoke to Joshua, "Look sharp now. I've already given Jericho to you, along with its king and its crack troops. Here's what you are to do. March around the city, all your soldiers. Circle the city once. Repeat this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry 7 ram's horn trumpets in front of the chest. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, the priests blowing away on the trumpets. And then, a long blast on the ram's horn. When you hear that, all the people are to shout at the top of their lungs. The city wall will collapse at once. All the people are to enter, every man straight on in." So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and told them, "Take up the chest of the covenant. 7 priests are to carry 7 ram's horn trumpets leading God's chest." Then he told the people, "Set out, march around the city. Have the armed guard march before the chest of God." And it happened. Joshua spoke, the people moved. 7 priests with their 7 ram's horn trumpets set out before God. They blew the trumpets, leading God's chest of the covenant. The armed guard marched ahead of the trumpet-blowing priests. The rear guard was marching after the chest, marching and blowing their trumpets. Joshua had given orders to the people. "Don't shout. In fact, don't even speak. Not so much as a whisper until you hear me say, 'Shout.' Then shout away." He sent the chest of God on its way around the city. It circled once, came back to camp, and stayed for the night. Joshua was up early the next morning, and the priests took up the chest of God. The 7 priests, carrying the 7 ram's horn trumpets, marched before the chest of God, marching and blowing the trumpets, with the armed guard marching before and the rear guard marching after, marching and blowing of trumpets. On the 2nd day, they again circled the city once and returned to camp. They did this 6 days. When the 7th day came, they got up early and marched around the city this same way, but 7 times. Yes, this day they circled the city 7 times. On the 7th time around, the priests blew the trumpets, and Joshua signaled the people, "Shout! God has given you the city. The city and everything in it is under a holy curse and offered up to God. Except for Rahab the harlot, she is to live, she and everyone in her house with her, because she hid the agents we sent. As for you, watch yourselves in the city under holy curse. Be careful that you don't covet anything in it, and take something that's cursed, endangering the camp of Israel with the curse, and making trouble for everyone. All silver and gold, all vessels of bronze and iron are holy to God. Put them in God's treasury." The priests blew the trumpets. When the people heard the blast of the trumpets, they gave a thunderclap shout. The wall fell at once. The people rushed straight into the city and took it. They put everything in the city under the holy curse, killing man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep and donkey. Joshua ordered the 2 men who had spied out the land, "Enter the house of the harlot and rescue the woman and everyone connected with her, just as you promised her." So the young spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, mother, and brothers, everyone connected with her. They got the whole family out and gave them a place outside the camp of Israel. But they burned down the city and everything in it, except for the gold and silver and the bronze and iron vessels. All that they put in the treasury of God's house. But Joshua let Rahab the harlot live. Rahab and her father's household and everyone connected to her. She is still alive and well in Israel because she hid the agents whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Joshua swore a solemn oath at that time. Cursed before God is the man who sets out to rebuild this city, Jericho. He'll pay for the foundation with his firstborn son. He'll pay for the gates with his youngest son. God was with Joshua. He became famous all over the land.